The story of Rolex does not begin in a luxurious workshop, but with an orphaned and poor boy whose passion for watches was unstoppable. Against all odds, that boy built the most prestigious watch company in the world. This is the untold story of how Rolex was born. And stick around until the end, because we'll reveal some surprising Rolex facts in 2025 that you won't want to miss. The orphan with the dream. At the end of the 19th century in Germany, a 12-year-old boy named Hans Wilsdorf was orphaned after the death of his parents. His relatives sold the family business and sent him to boarding school. There, a Swiss colleague told him about Switzerland's flourishing watch industry and sparked an unexpected fascination with watches in Hans. At the age of 19, determined to change his destiny, he left Germany and went to Switzerland, convinced that there, between gears, he would find his purpose. Watchmaker's apprentice in Switzerland. He got a humble job in a watch exporter, Kuno Korten, where he wound and verified the accuracy of hundreds of pocket watches every day. That monotonous task instilled in him discipline and an obsession with precision. After a couple of years, he felt it was time to move forward. In 1903, at the age of 22, he decided to move to London, then the epicenter of the global watch trade. He traveled to England full of enthusiasm and taking his inherited savings, about 3,300 gold marks. However, during the journey, they stole all that money, leaving him with almost nothing when he arrived. Still, Hans didn't give up. In London, he got a job at a watch company as a sales and marketing manager. During 2 years there, he learned a lot about the market and noticed something revealing. English manufacturers made highly ornate watches, but customers wanted the opposite. They were looking for simple, precise, durable, and elegant pieces. With this clear vision of the ideal watch, and despite his limited funds, Hans decided that it was time to found his own watch company. A company is born, a name is born. In 1905, at the age of 24, Hans Wilsdorf founded his own business with his brother-in-law, Alfred Davis, who provided the initial capital. Thus was born in London the firm Wilsdorf and Davis. From a modest workshop, they began their adventure. Hans had detected that travelers, businessmen by train, adventurers traveling long distances, needed watches that were reliable and easy to transport. Ordinary pocket watches were bulky and delicate for that hustle and bustle. As a solution, Wilsdorf and Davis created a compact and durable pocket watch, designed especially for travelers. The first product was a resounding success. Customers loved its portability and reliability, and sales took off. It was a huge achievement for such a young company. However, Hans was already looking beyond. He sensed that the future of watchmaking would not be in the pocket, but on the wrist. At the beginning of the 20th century, the idea of a man wearing a wristwatch was considered extravagant and was seen by many as feminine or unserious. But Hans, always one step ahead, was determined to break that prejudice. In addition, he understood that to conquer the public he needed more than just a good watch. He needed a powerful brand identity. He observed that most watches simply bore the name of the manufacturer or jeweler on the dial, names that were sometimes long or difficult to pronounce internationally. He wanted a name that was short, memorable, and sounded good in any language. After trying dozens of letter combinations, in 1908 a word came to his mind as if by magic while he was traveling in a carriage through London: Rolex. It was short, elegant, and, according to Hans, sounded like the precise ticking of a winding clock. Enthusiastic, that same year he registered Rolex as a trademark. From then on, Wilsdorf and Davis watches would proudly bear that 5-letter name on their dial, a name destined to become synonymous with excellence. From bracelets to wristwatches. The opportunity to push the wristwatch came soon. In 1906, Hans noticed that in Britain both gentlemen and ladies wore elegant bracelets on their wrists as a fashion accessory. What if a watch could be presented as a luxurious bracelet? With that idea, Wilsdorf and Davis launched wristwatches with straps made of precious metals, gold and silver, instead of the typical leather ones. These watches, which looked like refined bracelets, were not advertised as wristwatches, a term that many men disdained, but as bracelet watches. The strategy worked wonderfully. Luxurious yet accurate, These bracelet watches broke the prejudice around the men's wristwatch. Before long, British society, always attentive to fashion, began to adopt them. Men and women wore those gold and silver Rolexes on their wrists, proud to wear a beautiful and practical piece. By 1908, the name Rolex was already being heard in London's posh circles. Hans's prediction came true. The wristwatch was gaining acceptance and prestige. And as sales grew, Hans focused on another challenge, making sure his watches were not only popular, but also the most accurate on the market. The quest for absolute precision. Hans Wilsdorf knew that an attractive watch was useless if it was not accurate. At the beginning of the 20th century, many believed that a wristwatch would never equal a pocket watch in accuracy, due to the small size of its mechanism. Hans set out to prove otherwise. He worked with the best Swiss technicians, adjusting and improving his wrist movements. In 1910, he sent one of his watches to official tests in Switzerland. To everyone's surprise, that wristband Rolex passed the rigorous examinations and became the first wristwatch to obtain an official chronometer certificate for its precision. Until then, only Navy chronometers or oversized watches achieved such a distinction. In 1914, another Rolex obtained the highest certification of accuracy awarded in England and achieved a maximum rating. These milestones silenced the skeptics. Suddenly, a wristwatch could be as accurate as the best pocket watch. Rolex's reputation skyrocketed throughout Europe. By 1914, Hans's company already had offices in several countries and a team committed to quality. The wristwatch had gone from being a novelty to an object of trust and prestige. But when nothing seemed to stop his rise, World War I broke out. Crisis and opportunity in the Great War. The First World War, 1914 to 1918, threatened to destroy what Hans had built. Exorbitant taxes and a continent in conflict put Rolex on the ropes. Ironically, though, the war also created an unexpected opportunity. The conflagration brought very difficult times for Rolex. To finance the war effort, the British government imposed heavy taxes on exports of luxury goods. Overnight, London-made Rolexes became drastically more expensive abroad, losing competitiveness to Swiss-based brands. Sales plummeted. Faced with this crisis, Hans made a drastic decision. In 1919, he moved the company to Geneva, Switzerland. There, on neutral ground and in the heart of watchmaking, he refounded the company under the name Montres Rolex S.A. Rolex was reborn in the cradle of haute horlogerie, ready to take off when the war ended. Paradoxically, the war also accelerated the adoption of the wristwatch that Hans had predicted. In the trenches, soldiers found that taking out a pocket watch under fire was impractical. Many began to tie watches to their wrists with improvised straps to keep their hands free. Hans hurried to meet that need. During the conflict, Rolex supplied trench watches, robust wristwatches with unbreakable glass and luminous hands and indexes, thanks to radio, paint to read the time in the dark. These military watches helped Rolex survive financially and created a special bond with those who wore them. After the war ended, many soldiers returned home proudly wearing their wristwatches, now symbols of modern heroism, and the civilian public imitated their heroes. Just as Hans predicted, the wristwatch displaced the pocket watch. Rolex, already settled in Switzerland, and with Hans's vision intact, was ready to face the next technical hurdle that affected all watches of the time. The Rolex Oyster, the water-resistant watch, is born. Although wristwatches were gaining popularity, they had a deadly enemy: dust and water that seeped into and damaged their mechanisms. Hans decided to create a truly impenetrable clock to protect the delicate machinery of time. During the 1920s, he concentrated his efforts on making watch cases more watertight. Until then, lids and glass were snapped together, leaving small cracks through which dust or moisture would sooner or later enter. After years of testing, in 1926 Rolex introduced something revolutionary: the Rolex Oyster. It was the first wristwatch that was fully waterproof and dustproof. He achieved this by redesigning the case. Both the back cover and the front bezel were screwed to the central body, sealing the interior. In addition, the winding crown was screwed down, ensuring that not a drop penetrated. In essence, the inside of the watch was protected like a pearl in an oyster, hence the name. Hans knew that he had to prove this feat. In 1927, British swimmer Mercedes Gleitze attempted to swim across the English Channel. Hans saw the ideal opportunity. He gave her a Rolex oyster to wear around her neck during the crossing. After more than 10 hours in the frigid waters, Mercedes had to retire before completing the crossover, but the clock emerged intact and working perfectly. Wilsdorf was quick to publicize the achievement. He bought full-page ads in newspapers proclaiming the success of the Rolex Oyster on the Mercedes crossing. He even displayed Oyster watches submerged in aquariums inside jewelry stores, so that the public could see with their own eyes a watch working underwater. The strategy was a triumph. The Oyster became world-famous as the first truly waterproof watch. Rolex had solved a crucial watchmaking problem and turned it into a spectacle. If someone was looking for a reliable watch under any circumstances, the Oyster was the undisputed choice. Oyster Perpetual, the automatic watch. For many, the Rolex Oyster was already perfect, but Hans still wanted to eliminate one last drawback of mechanical watches, having to wind them manually. In 1931, Rolex patented the Perpetual mechanism, a semicircular internal rotor that rotated 360 degrees with the natural movement of the wrist and wound the watch automatically. Combined with the waterproof Oyster case, the Oyster Perpetual was born, the first wristwatch to be simultaneously waterproof and self-winding. Now the user could forget about winding up, just wearing it kept the clock ticking. And because the crown did not have to be handled frequently, the Oyster's water resistance was better preserved. This innovation cemented Rolex as a technical leader. Other manufacturers adopted self-winding systems in later years, but Rolex was a pioneer in making it reliable and practical on a large scale. By the early 1930s, Rolex had revolutionized two fundamental aspects of the wristwatch: resistance to the environment and running range. Hans Wilsdorf, that German orphan with a dream, had become a legend of watchmaking. And even though the world would come into conflict again, Rolex was prepared to resist. World War II, trials and legacy. World War II brought new challenges and personal losses for Hans, but he didn't let anything derail his work. At the end of the war, Rolex emerged stronger than ever. The outbreak of war in 1939 presented another challenge for Rolex. Material shortages and global turbulence affected production, but Hans managed to keep the company afloat. In 1944, Hans suffered the loss of his wife, Florence. With no children to bequeath his work to, he took steps to ensure Rolex's future in line with his values. In 1945, he created the Hans Wilsdorf Foundation and transferred all his Rolex shares to it. Thus, when he died, the company would be under the control of this charitable foundation, guaranteeing the independence of Rolex and allocating part of the profits to charity. With the end of the war, the world entered an era of reconstruction. Rolex, far from having been defeated by the conflict, was ready to innovate again. Post-war, the Rolex Datejust is born. With the world at peace, it was time to innovate for everyday life. Hans had a simple but revolutionary idea. What if the watch also displayed the date automatically? In 1945, to celebrate the company's 40th anniversary, Rolex launched the Datejust model. At first glance, it was a refined automatic wristwatch with the classic Rolex style, but it brought a novelty. A small window on the dial showed the day of the month, and the mechanism made that number change automatically at midnight. For the first time, the wearer didn't have to adjust the date every day. The watch took care of it. This practical performance delighted the post-war public, who appreciated any time savings in their busy lives. Years later, Rolex further perfected this idea. Some customers noticed that the figures for the date were somewhat small. Hans, always attentive, noticed how a drop of water on the glass magnified the image underneath. Inspired, in 1953, he added a small magnifying lens to the glass, known as a cyclops, that magnified the date number and made it much easier to read. That simple improvement became another hallmark of Rolex, conquering peaks and abysses. The 1950s saw humans reach extremes never before reached: the summit of Everest, the depths of the ocean, the era of intercontinental flight. and in every feat, a Rolex accompanied the pioneers, proving its worth in the most demanding conditions. In 1953, a Rolex accompanied the expedition that summited Everest, demonstrating its robustness in extreme conditions. That same year, Rolex launched the Submariner, the first 100-meter submersible watch, immediately adopted by divers. In 1955, he introduced the gmt-master, designed for pilots by being able to display 2 time zones at the same time. In 1956 came the day-date with full calendar, a luxurious gold model that many world leaders adopted and which earned the nickname the President. To crown that era, in January 1960, Rolex faced the most extreme challenge, the deepest point on Earth. That year, the bathyscaphe Trieste descended into the Mariana Trench, almost 11,000 meters under the sea, externally carrying a special prototype called the Rolex Deep Sea Special. After withstanding unimaginable pressure, the watch emerged working perfectly. Rolex had shown that its watches could survive where no other human artifact could, from the top of Everest to the bottom of the ocean. 1960 was also bittersweet. That year, with Rolex at the top of the industry, Hans Wilsdorf passed away at the age of 79. Thanks to his foresight, the company was left in the hands of the Hans Wilsdorf Foundation and managed by his trusted team. The philosophy instilled by Hans, quality, innovation, and reliability, continued to guide Rolex in the decades that followed. The legacy continues, 1960s to 1990s. Hans's death marked the end of an era, but it didn't stop Rolex's course. In the decades that followed, the brand faced new challenges, from the quartz revolution to the rise of global luxury, staying true to the path charted by its founder. Under the leadership of visionary successors, such as Andre Heiniger, CEO since 1963, Rolex continued to expand and strengthen its international prestige. In the 70s, he faced the quartz crisis, the arrival of Japanese electronic watches that threatened to make traditional mechanical watches obsolete. While many Swiss brands disappeared, Rolex decided to stay true to its mechanical roots. While he experimented with some quartz models, he concentrated his efforts on highlighting the craftsmanship, durability, and status of his mechanical watches. The strategy worked. By the 80s, luxury mechanical watches experienced a resurgence. They were no longer valued only for utility, but for their timeless and symbolic value. Rolex emerged from that test stronger than ever, cemented as the #1 brand in high-end watchmaking. Its classic models, Submariner, Datejust, Daytona, gmt-master, Explorer, among others, became synonymous with worldwide success. Wearing a Rolex became a universal symbol of personal achievement. In those years, Rolex also reinforced its image by associating itself as an official timekeeper to elite sporting events and discreetly supporting charitable causes, which reinforced the perception of the brand as a representative of excellence and progress. At the end of the 20th century, Rolex was still a privately held, independent company. Without shareholder pressure, the company could plan for the long term and maintain its high-quality standards. As we entered the new millennium, Rolex remained at the top of its industry, having overcome all the challenges of its first century. Rolex in the 21st century, reigning in 2025. The new millennium brought breakthroughs, but Rolex has shown that tradition and innovation can go hand in hand. In 2025, Rolex's crown shines brighter than ever, backed by impressive numbers and a global influence that its founder would hardly have imagined. In the 21st century, Rolex has continued to innovate without betraying its essence. It has incorporated new technologies and materials, such as ceramic bezels, special alloys, and more efficient mechanical calibers, to keep its watches at the forefront. But above all, it has seen its impact grow to unprecedented levels. Today, in 2025, Rolex leads the luxury watch industry with authority. It is estimated that it manufactures around 1 million watches a year, and yet global demand outstrips supply. The brand covers approximately 30% of the total value of the high-end Swiss watch market. Its annual revenue, although not officially disclosed, is estimated at over 10,000 million Swiss francs. This makes it one of the most valuable and recognizable luxury brands on the planet. The furor for Rolex in recent years has been such that many of its star models have waiting lists of months or even years. Some people pay significantly more than the official price to immediately get highly coveted parts such as the Daytona or the Submariner. At auctions, some vintage Rolexes have fetched tens of millions of dollars, ranking among the most expensive watches ever sold. To adapt to these times, in 2022, Rolex inaugurated a certification program for pre-owned watches, offering an official warranty to buyers of used Rolex through authorized dealers. And in 2023, it took a bold step by acquiring Bucherer, its historic retail partner, thus integrating a chain of luxury stores into its structure. With this move, Rolex has even greater control over the sales experience and after-sales service of its products worldwide, ensuring that its prestige remains intact. Despite its enormous scale today, Rolex continues to be guided by the legacy of Hans Wilsdorf. The company belongs to the Hans Wilsdorf Foundation and allocates part of its profits to charitable causes discreetly, keeping the spirit of its founder alive. More than 100 years after its founding, Rolex has become much more than a watchmaker. It is a global symbol of quality, tradition, and success. And to think that everything came from the vision of a young man who, despite poverty and adversity, never gave up on his dream. Rolex's history proves that passion, innovation, and perseverance can transform humble beginnings into an eternal legacy. Today, every tick-tock of a Rolex continues to tell that story. And just as Hans Wilsdorf envisioned, the Rolex crown continues to reign perpetually in the world of watchmaking, a legacy destined to last for generations.